Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Sydney from PhoneDog.com and welcome to Phone Dog Live, episode 32, if you can believe it. I'm actually, it's kind of strange that we're already to 32 episodes, but this is episode 32, and it is the last one of the year. We barely made it before we got to 2012, but it's a good thing because it gives us a chance to look at the year in review, which is what we're going to be doing this week. If you are watching this on Ustream, thank you for being here. Feel free to leave your comments, talk about whatever I'm talking about, or you can talk about a completely different topic, which is what you guys usually do. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you also for watching. You can also leave your comment, and I usually read those. So if you have any questions or you just want to, leave your thoughts, I usually read those comments also. And on YouTube, you can check out the description below the video because I have a timeline there, and so you can kind of skip around and see whatever you want to talk about. This week is going to be a little bit different because, like I said, we're going to be doing sort of like, looking back on the year and all the big things that happened in the mobile space. So it's mostly just like one big topic, but I'm going to try to break it down if you want to still jump around. And so, check out that timeline. But anyway, thank you everyone for being here. I'm excited. I was getting ready for the podcast and I was getting my notes together, and which took a little bit longer this week because I had to go through and just, find the biggest stories throughout the year. And of course, a lot of them I remember, at&t Mobile, the merger. I mean, that's still fresh on our minds. And of course, it's been a tough year for webOS and for RIM. But there were some things that I forgot about, or just, maybe didn't even realize how big they actually were. And so, you guys maybe this will be a memory refresher for you too, but it was pretty cool to go back and just look at everything that's happened, and maybe it's just me, but it really feels like this year, and not just for us, but really for the world, has been big in terms of technology and smartphones. And I don't know if it's just because I work for a mobile technology website, or I do cell phone reviews, so I read about them all day, but it seemed like even for the average consumer, smartphones and tablets were really big this year. So it's exciting for us because, it gives our job more meaning, whenever people care about us. Which brings me to the next thing I wanted to say, which was you guys, your reader, or our readers, our viewers. We really do appreciate having you guys here. I can write all I want to write, or, doing this show, I can say whatever I want to say, or, we can do all these videos, but it doesn't mean anything if you guys aren't watching them, leaving your comments, telling us how much you appreciate them, telling us things that you don't like about them, things that we need to change or fix. I mean, we love all of that. And so I just wanted to say really quickly, thank you guys for being there for us. This year for Phone Dog was one of our best years. I was talking to Aaron, it was actually a couple of weeks ago, and he said, for the past couple years, the site has just continued to grow, and this year was no different. You would think eventually, you just grow and then kind of top out, but we've continued to grow, and this year has been one of our best years in terms of traffic and in terms of content, and so we thank you guys for that. But this year has also been big for several other reasons, and these were the big things that stood out to me. You guys, there may be something else that was just huge to you, and you feel free to talk about those on Ustream or on YouTube. If there's something that you thought, hey, what about this? This was huge. Let me know, because I want to know what you guys thought about this year. But first, I really think this was Android's year. Of course, Apple and the iPhone, it's always going to be big, and the iPhone 4S, it's a great phone, it's an awesome phone. But if you look at the growth with Android, it was huge, and I don't even think I realized it, because I guess it just seems like ever since Android came onto the market, it just immediately gained steam and started growing, which has been true over the past couple of years, going back to 2007, but particularly true this year. This year was huge for Android. In fact, not that long ago, ComScore, actually I think this was within the past week, maybe yesterday, ComScore posted its report on the wireless market, and Android finished November with a market share of 46.9%, which is a 3.1% jump from August of this year. Andy Rubin said that during Christmas, between December 24th and 25th, there were a total of 3.7 million Android devices activated. The number of Android-powered device activations each day has jumped to 700,000, and I'm pretty sure I remember when it was 500,000, and that wasn't that long ago. I mean, I think that was really at the start of this year, maybe, and now it's already up to 700,000. So huge growth for Android. Let me see, the last time we got word from daily Android activations from Rubin, the number was 500,000, yeah, which is what I remember. And back in December 2010, basically 1 year ago, it was 300,000. So in 1 year, Android activations per day have jumped from 300,000 to 700,000. That is a fast, quick growth. And during 2010 and 2011, Android went from being 9.6% of smartphones sold to 52%, or going by ComScore's numbers, about 47%. So, just from 2010, on into this year, went from 7% to 50%, literally. And so for Android, this year has been huge, and we've seen that in just so many Android devices that were released, and not just the sheer number of phones, but the quality of the phones. Phones like the Droid Razr, the HTC Resound, the Sensation, the G2X, going all the way back to the beginning of the year, the Nexus S. These are high quality phones, the Galaxy S2, and they just kept being released, and the Droid 3, the Droid Razr, I could go on and name all of them, but there were so many Android phones, and they were all amazing. They were all great. And so I really think this year was the year of Android. I mean, undeniably, the number of phones, the quality of phones, the market share, and then and tablets. And tablets was, for me, the next big thing, the next big story to come out of 2011, because tablets really took off in 2011. And the iPad came out in 2010, and then of course everyone wanted to, have an iPad killer or an iPad competitor. And, of course, I don't really think it's, necessary to have like an iPad killer, because in every other category of the world, there's no killer. Like, you have Toyotas and Hondas, which are great cars, but there's never like a Honda Civic killer. There's just another compact car. We look at computers, there's not like a MacBook killer, there's just another laptop. So, I mean, I don't think it's necessary to have an iPad killer, but, whatever you want to call it, manufacturers got busy with making tablets, and it's kind of started at the tail end of 2010. But 2011, right at the beginning, January, is where it really started, starting with the Motorola Xoom. Now, this is an interesting number, and I didn't even realize this, or maybe I forgot, but at CES in January of this year, there were over 100 tablets announced. Now, not all of those have been released, and some of them are, vaporware. We may never see them. But just the fact that, manufacturers came on that strongly to the tablet market, that made it sound anyway. Okay, just the fact that they were so devoted to the tablet market. Tablets like the HTC Flyer, the Acer Iconia, the G Slate, the Playbook, the Transformer, the HP Touchpad, the Zoom, iPad, of course, Galaxy Tab Vizio, Kindle Fire Nook tablet, Toshiba Thrive. Now we already have the Zoom 2, or the Zyboard, the Sony Tablet S, ViewSonic ViewPad, Dell Streak, the Lenovo LaPad, and these are just some of the mainstream ones, and even that, there's just dozens of tablets, and it seems like it was just constantly there was another tablet coming out, and so and of course another CES is coming up in January, and we're probably going to see 100 more tablets. But 2011 was definitely when that market took off, and and I think 20 it was important to establish a tablet market because some people still wonder, like, yeah, there's a lot of tablets being made, but is anybody actually buying them? Or, I mean, do we really need tablets? Are tablets popular simply because of the iPad? Do people buy the iPad because they want a tablet, or do people buy the iPad because they want an iPad? They want an Apple product. And, I think maybe in 2011, that question wasn't really answered, but I think it was established. I mean, before 2011, no one even asked that question. But now we have that question, and I think that's a start. And then in 2012, we're starting to see, more tablets that are more capable. I would expect to see. Aaron is not the CEO of PhoneDog, just so you know. Aaron is the editor-in-chief of PhoneDog.com, but he's not the CEO. That was a question from Ustream. Sorry, I just happened to fall on it and decided to answer it. Anyway, but I think 2012 will see more tablets, with a lot more power, more capabilities, but also maybe some cheaper prices. And we're seeing that already with tablets like the Kindle Fire, which was $200, and the Nook tablet, which is $250. They're not as full featured as like the Galaxy Tab or the Zoom or the iPad, but they have enough features and performance is good enough, and the price is incredibly cheap. And I've said this like a million times. If you guys watch this show, you've heard me say this so many times. But to me, I think a tablet is really meant for media consumption. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. And I think that's why that question came up. Like, do we need tablets? Do I need to pay $600 for something that's just meant for media consumption? And I think for a lot of people, the answer was no. But if we can change that question and instead be, should I pay $200 for something that's made for media consumption? I think for a lot more people, it would be yes. And so, 2011 established the tablet market, and I think 2012 will give us reasons to buy tablets. And starting with the Transformer Prime, which is going to be like freaking awesome. I'm so excited for that tablet. And so, hopefully we should see that. But yeah, so far, for me, and everything else I'm going to talk about, they were also big stories. But for me, I think 2011 was all about Android, and it was all about tablets. Not just Android tablets, because we had tablets like the Playbook, the HP Touchpad, the iPad, of course. So, it wasn't just Android, but really tablets in general. To me, that's what defined 2011. Other big stories. There were a couple of huge acquisitions. At least there was one big one and then one that almost happened but didn't. And actually, whenever I first started thinking about the acquisitions, I originally thought that HP bought Palm in 2011. I don't know why I thought that, but I guess because it doesn't seem like that long ago, but that actually happened in 2010. But in 2011, Google bought Motorola Mobility for $12.5 billion, which is a ton of money. That happened in August. And it was really kind of like a low-key thing. I mean, we hadn't heard too much about it. It just happened all of a sudden. And then there were some stories about, what does this mean for Motorola? What does it mean for the other manufacturers? What does it mean for Android? And some of those questions sort of got answered, but not really. And then it kind of just died off. And that was really it. It was Google buys Motorola. And then, nothing really special. Motorola came out with several new devices. They were great. They still featured Motorola's UI. The Nexus device wasn't a Motorola device like some people thought it would be. So it's really kind of this low-key acquisition that I have a feeling isn't done yet. I mean, obviously Motorola had a lot of patents that Google needed in order to, help out its other manufacturing partners with all of these, lawsuits that Apple is throwing at them. But that's only one part of Motorola. I mean, Motorola has a lot of patents, and yeah, that's helpful. But, Motorola also makes phones, and they happen to make Android phones, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So, I have a feeling that that's not quite done yet, but, it's maybe we'll save that for 2012. We'll have to see. The other big acquisition, and then this was huge, that took up the whole, there's so much drama. We talked about this nearly every week, I think, from the time it first came into the news, AT&T's proposed acquisition of T-Mobile. Originally, it was for $39 billion, again, a ton of money. And this was, there was a lot of drama because, both sides seemed to have fair arguments. AT&T said, our network is suffering, we need spectrum. And, T-Mobile is suffering, monetarily, and they have spectrum. So, we want to join forces, which, put in a simple way like that seemed to make sense. But, once the public got a hold of the story and heard about it, there was a ton of backlash. I think, virtually everyone was against it except for the few, AT&T customers that were like, yes, maybe we can get some more spectrum and our, network won't suck anymore. But, for the most part, I think a lot of people were against it. Regardless of AT&T's claims about spectrum, which, I've heard back and forth on, AT&T is hiding spectrum, they don't need spectrum. No one has really explained to me how it's possible to hide spectrum, but that's the argument that I've heard. But I think, just bigger than that was the consumer and what it would mean for the consumer. It would basically create a monopoly of GSM, create one major GSM carrier, which, just didn't seem right. We have right now in the major players, we have 2 CDMA networks, and then we have 2 GSM networks, and then, there's other regional carriers or carriers like, US Cellular, Metro PCS that are, gaining customers and popularity, but for the most part, they're not, large carriers like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint. So it would have created this monopoly, of just one GSM carrier, and a lot of people felt like that would be a bad idea, which is a good point. Monopolies rarely, if ever, lead to benefits for the consumer. So, but it was, that was a huge story throughout the year. We had the constant back and forth. And then the FCC and the Department of Justice, they were clearly against it from the beginning. I don't really think this acquisition ever really stood a chance because, we just saw, numerous reports that the FCC was not going to support it. There was a report that was released sort of unexpectedly where, they basically it was just a scathing report telling AT&T how, they didn't think that they needed this acquisition. And then AT&T said, all right, we're going to resubmit it, but then they decided not to. And in early December, the deal was dead. AT&T had to pay Deutsche Telekom, T-Mobile's partner or parent company, $3 billion in cash plus spectrum licenses that were valued at roughly $1 billion, which was great for T-Mobile. It was it was awesome. But that was, again, one of the big stories. Kind of surprising that, again, like I said, the Google buying Motorola's acquisition was not as big as you would think, but I guess maybe because at the same time the AT&T and T-Mobile thing was going over, and so maybe people were sidetracked by that. And as far as we know, that deal is dead, and so no potential stories there for 2012. Obviously, there have been some suitors, other suitors who could buy T-Mobile. Dish Network has come up. But again, we'll have to see what happens in 2012. A lot of these stories are sort of unfinished. The tablet market, like I said, we'll have to. I'm anxious to see what happens with that in 2012, and then again with T-Mobile. It's clear that T-Mobile needs help, so obviously something is going to happen. Next up, another just kind of major story, not surrounding one particular company, but Nokia, webOS, and RIM. This was not a good year for these three, Nokia and RIM companies, and then webOS, the operating system, or I guess you could say Palm, and HP. Not a good year. Starting with webOS, the year started off with promise. webOS suffered from the very beginning. The very first phone, it suffered. Palm just didn't have the money that was required to make an operating system successful in terms of advertising and trying to gain developer support. And so, webOS was suffering and everyone thought it was dead, that it was going to go away. And then HP came in like the knight in shining armor and bought webOS. And, for $1.2 billion. This was again in 2010, but everyone's like, great, yeah, HP, they make hardware, they'll make some phones, and webOS is alive, and it was like, hallelujah. But so the year started off well, and then we got reports that HP did not buy Palm to get into the smartphone business. So we were like, okay, a little disappointing, but there was still hope for webOS. In July 2011, actually in May 2011 first. In May 2011, the HP Veer was released. It was a crap phone. I mean, it was a fine phone, and of course webOS made it 10 times better than what it was just as a phone. But it was tiny. It was just it was not the right phone to release at that moment. And then it just got worse from there. In July, the touchpad was released, and I don't think they sold any of them, not initially. And within about a month, within about a month after the touchpad was released, HP announced that they had decided to discontinue operations on webOS hardware. And that was sad. That really sucked. I remember hearing about that, and webOS had struggled. Like I said from the beginning, HP never really did the right thing. The devices weren't that great. The touchpad was not as good as it should have been. But to just give up 1 month after the touchpad was released, you have bad sales for 1 month, and to just give up, it was really sad to see. For something that had so much potential. The Pre 3 was released in August 2011, but there was really no point to it because everyone knew webOS is dead. You buy it for a collector's item if you have enough money to, do that. And then that's pretty much the end of it. HP has now decided to open source webOS, so there's hope that someone could pick it up, but really 2011 was just a bad year for Palm and for webOS, and really for HP. I mean, HP is the one that screwed everything up. Bad decision making. More bad decision making came from RIM. BlackBerries for a long time, they were king of the mountain. Everyone had a BlackBerry. It was the business device. It was the adults' grown-up device. All the kids had iPhones, and BlackBerry was still king of the mountain. But again, bad decision making. They waited too long to release good devices that could keep up with the competition. They weren't willing to evolve. As good as the BlackBerry Bold 9900, 9930, the new Torch, as good as those phones are, they're really just minor evolutionary upgrades when really what BlackBerry needed was a revolution, something to bring them back to the market and say, hey, we're not Apple, we don't have the iPhone, but we have this and it's just as good. But instead they were like, we're not, it's not the iPhone, but it's still like, it's a good phone, and it's got like a little touchscreen and stuff. And it wasn't what RIM needed. And I've said it before, I think they were just too stubborn for too long. They held on to all these beliefs about how, it's all about business and email and keyboards and no one cares about games and web browsing on their phone. We don't need that. And yeah, I mean, with BlackBerry, with OS 7, major improvements in the web browsing department, but it was too late. They waited too long. And so right now, RIM is, again, not doing well. We've heard that they could be releasing BlackBerry 10, previously known as BBX. They could be releasing BlackBerry 10 phones in late 2012, which is like, seriously? If it's like, are you trying to just kill your company? So, again, we'll see what happens to RIM in 2012, but not a good year for RIM in 2011. Nokia had, the problems with Symbian, and they couldn't decide if they wanted to keep it or if they wanted to let it go. They needed to let it go, but they didn't really have a backup plan. They had MeeGo, but it just wasn't ready yet. And finally, they partnered with Microsoft, and they're now releasing Windows Phone devices, so they're on the uptake. It's definitely getting better for Nokia, but that's like now in December. The rest of the year was just very bad for Nokia. So it's like basically 2011 was good for Android and Apple, and then for everyone else, it was just terrible, except for Windows Phone. Windows Phone, didn't make a splash, didn't have, huge selling numbers, but it didn't suffer. I mean, nothing declined really. I mean, when you only start with 1% market share, I mean, hey, you can only go up from there, which is what they've done. I think now it's at 5% market share. So, it wasn't an awesome year for Windows Phone, but it wasn't a bad year either when you think about it, and it's only getting better. Next big story of the year, patents, and this goes back to before when I was talking about the Google buying Motorola. One of the reasons for that was because Apple was just filing lawsuit after lawsuit against all these different companies. It was basically over Android. And it wasn't necessarily that they hated Samsung or that they hated Motorola. It was just Android in general. They felt that they had just blatantly ripped off pieces of iOS, and they weren't going to stand for it. Steve Jobs said, I've declared thermonuclear war on Android. I'm not going to rest until it's destroyed. And so that is what motivated them to sue, I think Samsung, Motorola, and HTC. I don't think I'm leaving one out, but it seemed like every week there was a new lawsuit, and some of them, they actually did get a couple of victories, but not all of them, not like you would think, which made sense because, in a lot of ways, Apple had a case. And of course, I'm not going to go into that in depth because, just kind of like doing the year in review thing. But, in some areas, Apple did have a case. And I think, we could all agree with that. TouchWiz does look exactly like iOS in some areas. But the bottom line is that it's Android, and Android is very different from iOS. And so, you can compare icons all you want, but, the Galaxy S has widgets and the iPhone doesn't. And I think that's pretty obvious to everybody, and no one's going to mistake it. So, but it was that was a big story. We saw that just all over, every week, every month, there was something new, and it was just Apple suing everybody. And it's not over yet. Some of the cases have finished. I think a couple of the cases in Germany and France are over, but major cases in Australia and the U.S. are still going on. Most of what we've been... This is the amazing thing. The amazing thing is that most of the stories that we've been hearing about this year were not even with the trials themselves. They just had to do with preliminary injunctions. So, as much as you hate hearing about all of this, we haven't even started. The trial hasn't even started yet. We're just getting to the preliminary injunction to see, what should happen until the trial starts. So this is far from over. And think about all the drama we had this past year in 2011. That was like not even half of it. 2012 will probably be a lot bigger. I think some of the patent trials are set to start in January, if not, early 2012. So brace yourself for it. Flash died in November. That was, not a major story, but it was a big one. I mean, Flash for a long time was what Android users, held on to as their, way of defending themselves against iPhone users, which I didn't think was necessary. I mean, a lot of people, like I said, use Flash, like, iOS, you may have all of this stuff, but we have Flash. And I was like, you don't really need to hang on to Flash so desperately because there are so many other things that Android has over the iPhone, over iOS. To me, I thought Flash was kind of like, really? Out of all the things that you could mention, that's the one you hang on to. So I never understood that argument. Because, like I said, there were so many other things, but now it's no longer an argument because Flash is dead. It will continue to receive support from Adobe. And of course, it's not just about smartphones. I mean, this translates into the internet and a lot of the internet. A lot of videos and advertisements, are Flash-based content. And so it will continue to receive support, but eventually HTML5 will take over. But that was in November. And then social networking. This was one that, I hadn't really thought about. Again, it was one of those things that, I knew about it. And I knew that social networking was huge and, everyone's on Twitter and Facebook, but I never thought of it as really, defining the year. But when you think about it, the growth that Twitter and Facebook experienced, not just in 2011, but also carrying over from 2010. But if you look at the growth they experienced and also the impact that it had on people, it was huge. In 2011, there were 1 billion Foursquare check-ins, which is a lot. I don't use Foursquare because I think it's kind of, why would I want to tell the internet where I'm at? Because you don't know who's reading that. But there were apparently a lot of people who disagree with me. Twitter, here's some numbers. In 2007, the average number of tweets per day was 5,000. In 2008, that had grown to 300,000. In 2009, it was 2.5 million. As of June 2011, users on Twitter are now averaging 200 million tweets per day. In 2011, 1 billion tweets are sent every week. As of September, Twitter has 100 million active users, 200 million registered users, and Twitter.com visitor growth is up 60% this year. So this was the year of where, social networking really took over Twitter. Google came out with Google Plus, and for all the cynics out there who thought that there was no more room, Google made room, and there are a lot of people on Google Plus. I still don't think it's gotten the what's the word I'm trying to say? I don't think it's as big as like Twitter and Facebook, obviously, but it did a lot better than people thought it would. Facebook now has more than 800 million active users. More than 7 million apps and websites are integrated with Facebook. I log on to ESPN a lot because I'm a big NBA fan, and it just boggles my mind that all of these websites like ESPN, I can log in with Facebook of all things. There was a 166% increase in Facebook mobile users in the first half of 2011 alone. So social networking was huge, but I think the thing that really stood out to me that really defined the year as, being a big year for social networking was not just the growth, but also the impact. If you guys remember the recent protests and uprisings in Tunisia, I probably did not pronounce that correctly, but also in Egypt, those uprisings, against the government were being called Twitter revolutions and Facebook revolutions because social networking had such a large part in them. People were able to tweet, they were able to update their Facebook page about what was going on, they could send out pictures, they could let people know, and without that, we might not have known what was going on because, unless major news outlets cover it and cover it on a regular basis and let us know about it, we're really out of touch with third world countries or countries where there is a lot of revolution and war and strife. And so social networking really had a big impact on that, on letting us know what was going on in other parts of the world. And so, 2011 social networking was huge. 4G and data throttling. 4G I knew. I mean, nearly every phone. OCD techies say, Sydney, turn around and fix the monitor. Did it turn off? Yeah, it turned off. Sorry. I'll just turn it off. There. See, the problem is that this is, if you're watching on YouTube and you're like, what the heck is she talking about? This is from Ustream. The problem is, I got a new MacBook Pro, and you can't just connect a monitor to a MacBook because, that would be like way too easy. And so you have to get like a special adapter like VGA to, whatever port is on your MacBook. And my previous MacBook, I had an adapter. So when I got this new one, I was like, awesome, adapter, monitor, boom. But not really because it's a different port now. And so I've ordered the adapter, but it's just not here yet. So that monitor is actually connected to my old MacBook. I just wanted to have something in the background, but it obviously got disconnected or the computer turned off apparently. So anyway, I'm sorry. So yeah, 4G and data throttling. 4G I remember because, like every phone is 4G now. And, the iPhone, the big deal about the iPhone was that it wasn't a 4G phone. That tells you how big 4G is. When the iPhone doesn't have a feature and it's actually a big deal. Like there's other features that Apple has that the iPhone hasn't had for a while. But it was never like, it's like, whatever, we don't have multitasking. We don't need multitasking. But 4G was like, ooh, I don't know, that's kind of a big deal. So 4G was huge, but also data throttling. I don't know if you guys realize this. I forgot about all of this. Data throttling really started in 2011. at&t started throttling data October 1st. Whoops. Verizon started throttling data in September. T-Mobile started throttling data, but then they stopped throttling it in August for their 200 megabyte plan. But I guess I don't know if they still use it on their other plans. I could never get some clarification on that. But throttling really started in 2011, and then Sprint is like the Lone Ranger. They're like, you know what? Psh, forget throttling. We got unlimited data, and everyone's like, yeah, right. That's not going to last, but it's lasted, and Verizon, for all the throttling that they're doing to try to save their network, they still have, 4 outages or 3 or 4 outages this year, whereas Sprint's just like totally fine, sit and chill, no problems at all. It's totally crazy. Yeah, that's been a big story. Lastly, at least for me, the last big story that I think to me really affected the mobile world was Steve Jobs passing away on October 5th, which was just one day after the launch of the iPhone 4S. And he had been suffering, for a while. He had cancer for a couple of years, and, he had surgery. Everyone thought he was kind of okay, but then he had more complications. And so he stepped down earlier this year, stepped down as CEO. And no one was really sure what his condition was, but the fact that he stepped down, we started worrying that, maybe something was wrong. And then when he didn't make an appearance at the iPhone 4S launch, then we were like, okay, something's wrong. And then the very next day, we found out. So, again, I said a couple of things whenever we did the show that week that it happened, but Steve Jobs, he had a lot of impact on the mobile market, the iPhone, obviously, smartphone revolution, So he definitely was a great inventor. Thankfully, we still have some other brilliant minds out there that are still creating some amazing devices, some amazing products, and just plain awesome technology. So the mobile world will continue, but we will miss Steve Jobs' contributions. Those were, to me, the biggest stories of 2011. As a recap, it was the year of Android and the year of tablets. We had some huge acquisitions. It was a really bad year for Nokia, webOS, and RIM. Patent lawsuits aplenty, flash dies, social networking lets us know what's actually going on in the world, 4G and data throttling, and then, like I just said, Steve Jobs passing away. I want to know, though, what you guys think was the biggest story, or you can give me, your top 5 or, top 10 biggest stories, because, this is from the point of view of somebody who, reads about mobile news, like, literally every single day. It's my job, every single day, all day, but, maybe for you guys it was a different story, so let me know. I recently published a top 5 list of the best smartphones of 2011, and, so if you guys have checked, if you've seen this list, I want to explain. Whenever I started making this list, I I realized that the top 5 phones of the year, like if you just look at the spec sheet and just, boom, best processor, best display, best camera, it's basically just the 5 most recent phones, really, because it only makes sense. As technology progresses, the best phones are going to come out at the end of the year. That's just the way it is. And so I thought, well, that's kind of boring. I really wanted to know the phones that had the biggest impact. What were the phones that really caught our attention? The phones that held our attention? The phones that, like I said, the ones that were the most impactful. And so if you're wondering why the HTC Resound is not on that list, because yeah, it's an awesome phone, and it's, you could easily say it's one of the best phones of the year in terms of specs, but I'm not just talking about specs. I want to know the ones that really caught our attention. Number one, the Galaxy S2. For me personally, I think this was simply the best phone of the year. There are other phones that maybe, the HTC Resound has the highest pixel density. Yes. The iPhone 4S, I think, has the best camera on any smartphone. There's other phones that have other strengths, but just all around, the Galaxy S2 has everything. It has a beautiful display. It has, high-res, large display. It has a camera that can rival the iPhone 4S. The dual-core processor, whether you're talking about the Snapdragon versions or the Exynos versions, super fast. Just all around, it was the whole package. I think it was the best phone of the year, and it was a tough decision. I compared the Droid Razr, the Galaxy S2, the HTC Resound, the iPhone 4S, maybe one other phone, maybe the Galaxy Nexus. I compared all of them, and trust me, I went back and forth. At one time, the Resound was number one. I did have it listed at number one, but I decided, you know what? In every category, if you just put it all together, the Galaxy S2, I think, was the best phone of the year. Number two, the Apple iPhone 4S. Yeah, it has a tiny display, and the dual-core processor is clocked at 800 megahertz. Yes, and it's not a 4G device. I know that, but I'm not talking about, like I said, not the phones with the best specs, the phones that caught our attention. And, no matter what you say, the iPhone will always capture our attention because Apple just does that. We waited for months for the iPhone 4S, and despite all of the failings that people talk about, it broke records. They still sold millions. And so, when you think of phones that came out during the past year, you're going to think of the iPhone 4S. Number three, I put the Galaxy Nexus. As amazing as it is, TIO map processor, the 5 megapixel camera is awesome. And, the megapixel count doesn't tell the whole story, but it's not as good as, other phones out there. But I think what really defines this phone, it's not about the processor or the camera, it's about ice cream sandwich. And so that was definitely number three, third best phone of the year. I have the Nokia Lumia 800 as number four, and I know it doesn't have a dual-core processor. I could list off all the things that, make this not as good as other phones out there that I didn't list, but it's Windows Phone, and it's a huge phone for Windows. I mean, we've had a lot of Windows Phone devices this year, but the Lumia 800 is probably the best one of them. It represents a huge partnership and a huge step for Microsoft and Nokia, so I think it was a significant phone. It may not be the best phone spec-wise, but it is a significant phone for 2011. And then fifth, I put the Evo 3D, the Thrill 4G, basically just all 3D phones. And this spot was the most difficult, and I want to tell you guys my thinking. At one point, I had the Droid Razr on here in this spot. I think I had maybe the Droid X2 or something, because obviously, there's other phones since then that are better, but that one was actually a huge phone when it came out. I think I had a couple of other phones here. All the ones that you guys have listed, why wasn't on the list? It was on the list at one point, but when I sat back and thought about it, 3D, it was huge this year, and maybe it was a flop, but it caught our attention, and it was a huge marketing scheme by the manufacturers and the carriers. So 3D, I have the Evo 3D and the Thrill 4G, because the Thrill 4G was the first, or the Optimus was the first 3D phone in the world. The Evo 3D was the first 3D phone in the US, so that's why I have them both. But those are my top 5 phones of the year. We don't have time to talk about it, but Taylor has an article on his the top five technology I'm looking forward to in 2012, and this is looking forward into the future. And there's some things that I'm really excited about too. He has the iPhone 5 on here. I know a lot of people were like, "Why the iPhone 5? You're just an Apple fanboy. What about all the hundreds of Android devices?" Yes, but keep in mind, the iPhone is always going to capture our attention. It doesn't matter if there's 10 other Android phones that are better than it. It will capture our attention no matter what, simply because Apple just has a way with customers. So look at that article. Like I said, we don't have a lot of time to talk about it. But it's 4:45, which means it's open Q&A time. Feel free to ask me any question, or let me know what was your story of the year. What do you think was the story of the year? Guys on YouTube, you can also ask me a question. Like I said, I check those, I read those comments. I'll try to answer them if I can. Or you guys, let me know what you thought was the story of the year. So, and I am on Facebook. I'll try to remember to check that every couple of minutes and see if we have any questions there. So, okay, Ustream. Let's talk more about 4G. If you have a question about a phone, we can talk about it. Plenty of 4G phones coming. I think one of the great things that really made 2011, really made 4G huge in 2011 was not just the fact that we had a lot of 4G phones, but they weren't just super phones anymore. At the beginning of the year, you had to pay $300 to get a 4G phone, but now T-Mobile has some mid-range devices. You can get a 4G phone for $100. The average consumer can now have a 4G phone, and I think that's really what made it huge. Hey Sydney, did you post last week's Phone Dog Live on YouTube? I believe I did. Yeah, I usually try to post it on Saturday. I posted it on Monday one time, and but that was only once. But I usually post it on Saturday, which will be tomorrow or today if you're watching this on Saturday. How do you feel about the Verizon outages? I was going to talk about that, but I didn't have time. Just so you know, if you guys want to ask about any of these stories, I was going to talk about the new leaked iPhone hardware, if you want to ask me about that, the Verizon outages, the Droid 4, Galaxy Note. So if you want to ask me about that, I'll talk about that too. I just didn't have time, and I want to get to the open Q&A. Verizon outages, yeah, Verizon just can't catch a break. Like I said, they've had 3 or 4 outages this year. Within just the past couple of weeks, they've had 3, and they've given us a pretty logical explanation, and hopefully they'll fix it. But it's a shame. I mean, I think Verizon. I love the network. Every time I test a Verizon phone, it always offers me the fastest 3G and 4G speeds. But I think their prices are just way too high. And whenever you have a network that has 4 outages in a year, I mean, that's kind of saying a lot. So, and then this was just terrible timing. Verizon is now going to charge a $2 convenience fee for bills paid online or over the phone, which in itself is not bad. I mean, there's a lot of companies that do this. I think people are kind of like blowing up about this simply because they're mad at Verizon for the outages. But if you just take the story by itself, there's a lot of companies that charge when you pay over the phone or online. But it was just, it was terrible timing. So I feel kind of bad for him. I'm an Android fan. I'm just curious about what new things Apple will bring. Well, if you want to talk about the hardware, I'll show you guys this quick picture. This is just a render. And so BGR got, their sources or whatever, said that the new iPhone 5 was going to have an aluminum back. And so this is the render that they created. And as you can see, it basically looks like an iPad, just, smaller. I actually really like this design, and I think it makes a lot of sense because it looks just like the iPad. It also looks like the MacBook, the iMac, and all of those devices have a uniform design. And then the iPhone was like just the random, not ugly duckling because it's pretty hot, but it just always had like the design that didn't really fit in with their other products, and that just was not like Apple to do that. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I like it a lot. Let me check Facebook and see if there's any. Oh, okay. Here's one from Facebook. Galaxy Nexus versus iPhone 4S. Um, I'm not sure. I wonder if Aaron has done that dogfight. I'm sure he has because that would be a pretty huge dogfight. Let me see. No, we don't have that dogfight. So yeah, I think if I'm correct, Cameron from Today's iPhone, which is our iPhone site, today'siphone.com, I think he did a comparison video with the Galaxy Nexus and the iPhone 4S. So maybe check that out on that site. Okay. Galaxy Note. Galaxy Note. This is the update from Samsung. They have sold worldwide shipments surpass 1 million, which is a lot. And they said it's coming to the US in 2012. No, time frame at all, but just 2012. So sometime within the next 12 months, it's a good time frame. Do you think Metro PCS will get some mid-range to high-end Android phones in 2012? Yeah, they already do. The Galaxy Indulge, that was an awesome phone. And then the LG Esteem, that was also a very high-end phone. So yeah, I think they'll continue that trend and get some competitive phones. The problem is that, they don't have contracts, so they don't subsidize phones. So, they charge like $300 or $400 for their high-end phones, which is what you would pay if you were to buy it, off contract and use it on, Verizon or at&t or whatever. But it just looks bad, because it's so expensive, because we're used to the subsidized price of $200. Sydney, since it's rumored that the Galaxy Note will hit at&t with LTE and the Exynos processor doesn't support LTE, would a Qualcomm chipset be a turnoff for you? No. I think, obviously, yeah, an Exynos processor would be better. Qualcomm, the Snapdragon S3 processor is awesome. The only way it'd be a turnoff probably if it was a TI map processor, because I think, Exynos is ideal. Snapdragon, it's still good. TI map, a lot of people have problems with that processor. So I think that would be the only turnoff for me. Maybe I should wear cargo pants with cargo pockets, then I'd pick up the Note. Okay. Stu got a Note for Christmas. Oh, cool. Sydney, what are your thoughts on prospects for T-Mobile US going forward? Like I said, it's clear that T-Mobile needs help. And Deutsche Telekom has said that they want T-Mobile to eventually be able to be self-sustaining. So, we've heard that Dish could partner with T-Mobile. We've heard that at&t and T-Mobile could still partner, just not as one company. And that's still a possibility. So, what do I think will happen? I'm not sure, but there's definitely a lot of options out there, and those are good to have. I think Windows Phone 7 should get higher res displays. I agree with you. I do. I think that's a good point. I agree TI should stick to making calculators. Hey, I live in Texas, okay? Actually, it's pretty cool because there's a Texas Instruments plant, I guess, or whatever, not that far away in Plano, which is a suburb of Dallas. And I actually used to live in Plano. It's where I was born. And so I'd always heard of Texas Instruments because it was like right down the street. And I never knew it was a national brand until I was much older, because I just thought, I live in Texas, so of course we use Texas Instruments products, but it was kind of funny when I found out, oh wow, people actually know about that. It's pretty cool. Will HTC Sensation get ice cream sandwich? We do not have any solid release dates about any phones for ice cream sandwich. This is what I know. Sony Ericsson phones will get ice cream sandwich in March or April. LG phones will get ice cream sandwich in Q2. I believe HTC has said the same thing, although I didn't write it down for some reason, so I'm not sure about that. Most companies have said that, yes, their recent high-end phones will get ice cream sandwich, but we really have no solid release dates. It could be Q2, it could be summer, which really sucks. Stop talking about ice cream sandwich. I really want one. Why doesn't T-Mobile ever get any Motorola phones? They had the Click and the Click 2, the Click XT. They had the Motorola Devour, the Motorola Citrus, or the Citrus, was that AT&T? They've had some Motorola, they don't have the high-end Motorola phones. That may have something to do with, maybe Motorola and Verizon have an agreement or something, and they always shop the high-end phones for Verizon because it seems like Verizon always gets a lot of high-end Motorola phones. It may have something to do with that. I'm not sure. I want some citrus fruit now. Okay. I'm always somewhat amused and slightly frustrated when people think that you guys at Phone Dog know all the details about launches and updates. Yeah, it's, I can understand though, because, you guys, you focus on one or two phones and you follow them for a couple of months and you wait till they come out and then you buy it, or, maybe not. But, there's a couple of phones that are exciting to you, or maybe one operating system that's exciting to you, or, maybe you're a developer and you work hard on Android and you know the ins and outs of Android. I have to know about every operating system, every single phone, every single carrier, every single thing that happens in the mobile space. So yes, it's a little complicated, but at the same time, I can't complain because it's my job and I love my job and I have a cheat sheet. So there's that. It makes it a little bit easier. I told you guys whenever I lost my cheat sheet, because I had to get a new hard drive for my old MacBook, and I lost everything, and so it was like originally like 15 pages long, size 9 font of just every phone that was going to come out within the next year, and I've had to restart. Now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages long, so it's slowly growing. Let me check Facebook. Okay. No questions on Facebook. Nokia Ace and other Windows phones with LTE are going to be amazing. What are your biggest expectations there? Yeah, I want to see LTE. I want to see 4G on Windows phone devices. I think that's important. And I think Microsoft knows that. Nokia knows that. The carriers know that. Verizon has said, we're not gonna get a phone unless it's 4G. Even though we're hearing that T-Mobile Verizon will get the Lumia 710, a non-LTE version in April. So I don't know, maybe they're making an exception there. But yeah, I think once the Lumia 800 comes to the States, maybe if we get the Lumia 900 and some of these, really high-end super phones, I think public perception of Windows Phone is really changing. And, people are starting to use it, they're starting to see it, and they're starting to realize that it's not Windows Mobile, which is what people thought for a long time. Facebook is a wasteland when it comes to Phone Dog Live. I don't know. I mean, sometimes there's a ton of people on Facebook, and sometimes there's nobody. And then when there's a ton of people, I was like, wow, it's kind of random. Okay, I just come straight to the Phone Dog site. Okay, I deleted my Facebook. Too much drama. Okay, I have a Facebook page, but it's only out of necessity because because we have Aaron and I on Wednesdays and Fridays we do a Q&A on Facebook where we'll get on there and leave a post and then you guys can comment on it and ask us questions. And anyway, in order for me to do that, I have to have administrative privileges to Phone Dog's Facebook page. In order to have that, I have to have a Facebook page. So outside of that, I hardly ever use Facebook. I don't understand a lot of it just because I haven't taken the time to really figure it out because I use Twitter. So Twitter to me is a lot more simple. Do you think Verizon will ever get any more Windows Phone 7 phones? The HTC Trophy is the only phone on the network. Yeah, like I just said, we're hearing that they're going to get the Nokia Lumia 710, which is not a great phone, but they're going to get that. I think Verizon is just a little bit skeptical. They had the crash and burn with the Kin phones, and they just want to make sure. And there's a lot of demand for Android. There's a demand for the iPhone, and Windows Phone. They're like, we're not gonna offer them if we're not gonna sell any, and so they're just a little skeptical. But yeah, I think once we get some more like these Nokia devices, I think it'll really help. Who is the Phone Dog? The Phone Dog? I don't know. I'm not sure where that name came from. I joined Phone Dog 2 years ago, and it was just Phone Dog. I don't know who started. The guy that the president of Phone Dog. His name is Tom. I don't know if it was like he had a dog, and I'm not really sure. I have no idea. So I don't know who the phone dog is. Do you think mobile TV will get better in the future? Your thoughts in general? Yeah, the thing with mobile TV is that, like you have T-Mobile TV, but the live content is just not really there. And I think that's the reason why it suffers. And, then of course you're watching it on a tiny screen, and so there's also that to consider. Yeah, to me, mobile TV is kind of an afterthought. It might get better though. I mean, who knows? With technology, it's the possibilities are endless. The things that people do with technology, it's really amazing. So I'm not sure. Okay, it's 5 o'clock, which means it's time to go. I do want to tell you guys about this. I don't know if you guys were here in the beginning, but coming up next week is this that I told you guys about, the Ultimate Fanboy War. It will be taking place next Friday during next week's show, and I'm going to have a post on phonedog.com on Monday giving you guys more details on it, telling you guys how you can volunteer to be on the show. It's basically going to be, well, basically what it sounds like. I'm going to have some volunteers on the show, and they're going to just basically have a nice little battle over the operating systems. We'll have some iPhone fans, or iOS fans, Android fans. I'm going to try to get some Windows Phone fans, some webOS fans, and some BlackBerry fans, because I think it's only fair. I mean, those are great operating systems. And so they're going to be on the show, and I will moderate the discussion. But that's taking place next Friday. So be sure to tune in for that. And then again, I'll have the post on Phone Dog, and I'll let you guys know how you can volunteer and to be on that show. But anyway, it's going to be exciting. I'm excited for it. So I hope it turns out well. But that's it for the show. Thanks guys for coming. Obviously, like I just told you, I'll be back next Friday with another show. If I didn't answer your question, I'm really sorry. You can send me a message on Twitter. My screen name is phonedog_Sydney. Or you can watch the video on YouTube and leave a comment. I've said this like a million times, but I read those comments. And I guess that's it. I will see you guys next week. Bye.